Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you can hear me. Um, Thanks for joining for this panel, Innovation Zero, Cleantech Innovation, UK and Saudi Collaboration Opportunities. My name is Neil Quilliam. I am an Energy Director, Think, Research and Advisory. I'm joined by four excellent panelists this afternoon. I'm not going to read their bios. I'll just go through their names and positions. I would recommend looking at their bios. They've got deep and rich history in all of this area. To my left, we have Rubina Singh, who is the principal at Octopus Ventures. And then to her left is Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Juday, who is for Corporate Programs Director, Technology and Innovation at SABIC. And to Abdulaziz's left, we have Alison Young, who is Global Investment and Export Specialist for Connected Places Catapult. And last but not least, Nauman Al-Adami, who is the country head for Alphanar in the UK. So during our brief sort of 50-minute conversation, we're going to be looking at the role of clean tech. And I think we're going to be trying to look at the segue and the opportunities between UK and Saudi, but also looking at some of the sort of the giants like SABIC and then the sort of the ecosystem for SMEs. Very interesting kind of crossover there. We'll try and tease out some of the sort of the key points in those areas. Just to kick us off, Alison, I'd like to start with you. We hear a lot about decarbonisation of the transport sector, HGVs, maritime, and air travel as well. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about what you're doing in that space and unpack what that actually means and how that applies to our current situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at Connected Places Catapult, and we're one of the UK's 9 catapults. So there's a network, and it was founded to accelerate innovation in particular sectoral focus areas, and ours is mobility and the built environment. And kind of the linchpin of our strategy is very much kind of focusing on net zero and decarbonisation. And in terms of transport in the UK, we work with academia, industry, and government. We're doing a lot of work with DFT, looking at the decarbonisation of road freight, so heavy goods vehicles, trying to understand what the best solutions can be for the UK. We're looking at clean maritime in terms of smart ports, how can ports decarbonise, and in terms of aviation, looking at airports and the infrastructure needed, because I think it takes up to about 15 years to change the infrastructure for an airport. And if we soon to have, maybe not soon, but hydrogen aircraft that need refueling, part of that is looking at the infrastructure. So in the UK, we're doing a number of projects that are really focusing heavily on decarbonisation, but we're also working internationally, and we're doing a lot of work in Latin America, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific as well.
Could I ask you a little bit about the work in the Middle East?
Of course. So we have been doing a couple of projects in Saudi, and it's very much about positioning the UK as a partner. And we want to learn from Saudi, and collaborate and create those trade and investment opportunities that will benefit both the UK and Saudi Arabia. So creating, whether that's looking to create roadmaps. We've been doing a piece of work about future of flight. So looking at the future flight ecosystem, that could be drones and their applications, and there's a lot of regulations and policies needed around that. And it's looking at how we can build out a sustainable ecosystem that can develop and grow SMEs within Saudi Arabia, but also create opportunities for the UK to partner and collaborate long term.
Thank you. Talking about aviation, Nauman, maybe you
Yes.
could tell us a little bit about Alphanar, SAF, what it's doing, particularly up in the Northeast. I should say that I visited your industrial city last week. I spent a good 6 hours south of Riyadh, looking at your operations, which are highly impressive. And I think the journey and the story of Alphanar is one to be very proud of. Anyway,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So, first, maybe I will say a few words about the group, about Alfanar.
Yes.
As for people who do not know about Alfanar or familiar with our activities. So, Alfanar is a privately owned group. We generate revenues around 3.5 billion US with around 20,000 employees. The group is divided into three main divisions, I can say. One is manufacturing. The industrial city is part of our manufacturing sector. And we have a footprint of factories in Saudi, of course, but also in Europe. We have in Spain, in UK, and Italy, and also in India. We manufacture mainly electrical equipments from very basic switches up to wind turbines. We acquired a wind turbine manufacturer in India two years before, Symbion India, and basically we are expanding the portfolio still with other acquisitions, hopefully soon. The other division is the EPC. So we are known to be the largest power sector EPC. We deliver projects on EPC basis, and we provide also services as well to the power sector. The last division, which I come from, is the development, with a mandate to develop renewable projects globally. We started around 2013 with the decarbonization of power, and we were very successful in developing renewable projects, wind, solar, globally. And the UK operation is mainly focusing on the decarbonization of transport. It's based in the UK, so all the competencies will be based here in the UK. And we are developing the first project, and hopefully we will develop more projects in the near future.
Can I ask you why you came to the UK? Why specifically in the Northeast too?
Yeah, why the UK is first, we have a presence here, or because we own a factory and we have other activities in the UK. Now, the other reason is because the route we are using, which is waste, MSW to SAF, so basically waste to SAF, the UK market is, I can say, one of the most attractive globally after China, because the waste, it's a merchant market for waste, and you can get access to quantities of waste. In addition to that, the carbon capture basically ambition in the UK, because these projects will need carbon capture, and as you know, even in Europe, UK has the lion's share of carbon capture capacities, and they have ambitions to build more projects to capture the CO2, and this is important for us.
Thank you. Rubina, if I could turn to you, how can innovation and deep technology make a real difference in internationally, sort of within the kind of decarbonization space, and how important is investment, early investment into those technologies to sort of shift it from, say, university to the commercial side?
That sounds good. So I'll start by introducing Octopus Ventures to those of you who may not be familiar, and I'm hoping everyone can hear me. So I'm deep tech principal at Octopus Ventures, which is part of Octopus Investments, and we're one of the largest and most active early stage investors in VC across Europe. Our mission is simple. We want to invest in the people, ideas, and industries that are going to change the world. And over the past few years, our focus has been on three areas where we feel we can make the most impact in terms of both our efforts and investments. So these are empowering people, revitalizing healthcare, and enabling a sustainable planet. So I'm the pre-seed deep tech fund manager focusing on deep tech enabling a sustainable planet. And to answer your question, Neil, about the role of deep tech as in innovation and in driving us more towards a net zero future. So Again, for those of you who may not be familiar, by deep tech, what we mean is startups that are working on technologies that come out of significant on years of research and scientific advancements that can have potentially game-changing technologies. And deep tech has been around for centuries. It's a new word, but the concept's there. So the Haber-Bosch process that was invented during the Industrial Revolution, the light bulb, steam engine, these are essentially all examples of deep tech. And today we're facing many different global crises, not least of which is climate change. And then there's water scarcity, food security. And deep tech can play quite a big role in terms of enabling and providing the technologies which can be the solution in helping us address all of these. So for example, speaking of decarbonization of transport, we're looking at batteries, which in a way are platform technologies which have application across many different areas. We've seen significant advancement in batteries over the past decade, but I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of the opportunity and the applications there are. Alongside that, then there's hydrogen. Hydrogen's quite early stage, but again is one of those technologies where there's immense potential in terms of providing low carbon fuel for air, ground, and land transportation, for potentially decarbonization of heat, as well as energy in terms of more hard-to-abate sectors such as steel, cement production, where we don't really have those low-carbon solutions. However, when it comes to hydrogen, it's still early stages, especially in terms of the issues in terms of safety when it comes to handling, storage, transportation. So there's a lot of innovation required in these areas. Alongside that, we're looking at sustainable materials. We're looking at wastewater treatment. So there are applications here we're looking at in the UK, but there are technologies coming out of these universities which are tackling wastewater treatment, but also desalination, which is a growing market in Saudi and many other countries. And it is, I think it's really important to invest in these technologies at the early stage, because when you look at the universities across UK, across other countries as well, with KAUST and the systems in Saudi, there's incredible innovation coming out of it. So just to give you a stat from the UK, over the past decade, UK universities have contributed more than 80 billion in terms of gross value add, and more than, I can't remember the exact number, but many millions of jobs as well. But this incredible innovation here, but how do you translate that into real world applications that will actually help solve all these challenges that we're facing? So I think that's where this role of us as investors, corporates, government, we need that ecosystem to come together. But there are a couple of challenges that startups and innovation coming out of university face. So one is in terms of translating that research into real world applications, where they need that collaboration with the industry to really understand what the market needs and then develop the technology, translate into a product that will actually solve the solution. But then the other aspect, I think, is also around funding. Often at the pre-seed stages, early stage, funding can be a bit of an issue for these startups. But at the same time, I think that is an area where it's super important to help give them that investment support they need to really de-risk and validate the technology, to start speaking with customers, to take it to the value inflection points, whether they prove the concept and be ready to pilot and scale it up. And we are doing that in pre-seed stages, so coming in and providing startups with the 18 to 24 months runaway needed to really focus on developing technology rather than fundraising. But at the same time, I think there's just an incredible amount of innovation coming here where we can work collaboratively across regions and countries to really kickstart that deep tech, clean tech ecosystem in a way.
Thank you very much. Your enthusiasm is infectious. I feel like we're at this cusp where things are going to shift and change very meteorically. Going from startups, Abdulaziz, to Sabic, which is a giant. First of all, I'd ask you maybe just, I'm sure everyone knows who Sabic is, but perhaps you could just give a few lines about Sabic, and then tell us about some of the current sustainability projects that you're currently working on.
Okay, good afternoon, and I would like to thank the organizers for this amazing event. SABIC, Saudi Basic Industries Corporations, is mainly a company for producing chemicals, polymers, steel, as well as the specialty chemicals. So I could say we almost produce everything except wood and glass. So that's the part of, and we are distributed around the globe. with regards to the climate change solutions, pushing the sustainability towards net zero, SABIC announced the carbon neutrality for 2050. And one of the major achievements currently that we are proud of is the world's largest CO2 recovery and purification plant that could capture up to 500,000 metric ton per annum, 500,000 ton per year. So instead of venting CO2 to atmosphere, we capture CO2 at source, purify it up to 99.99 plus percent, and then utilize it to produce valuable products, create these valuable products like agriculture, chemicals, materials, the materials that our CO2 in the value chain are used as an alternative to glass, like the polymethyl methacrylate, PMMA, alternative to metals like the POM, polyoxymethylene or polyacetal. So those materials are essential, and the CO2 is there in the value chain for producing these valuable products. In addition to that, the CO2 also we are helping our customers, especially in the desalination plant, to provide them with our high purity CO2 to neutralize the desalinated water. For example, if you remove the salt from the seawater, it will become alkaline. So it's not good for drinking nor for agriculture. So what they do in the desalination plant, they are adding CO2 to neutralize and reduce the pH of this water to become suitable for drinking. So here we are turning the carbon emissions, the source of carbon emissions, into the source of life. So this is one example of what we are doing with the CO2. Another example is what happened in 2020 about the blue ammonia. So imagine transferring the electricity from city to city or from country to country, the cables that you need and other infrastructure. But once you have the hydrogen and you produce it in the form of ammonia, and then you can ship this product to Europe, to the UK, and then reproduce the energy. So that's the innovative ideas of using the ammonia as a carrier for the energy. So those, and then finally last year we shipped the blue ammonia to South Korea as a commercial shipment. Thank you.
Yo.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to take one more round of questions, and then I'll sort of open it up for our colleagues around the tables. Alison, we've heard now about large-scale projects. Can we maybe take it back to SMEs and think about the role of SMEs within the decarbonisation process itself, and maybe tell us a little bit about the work being done by Connected Places Catapults in the sort of cluster area? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So a core part of the work that we do is focused on supporting SMEs, helping them access commercial opportunities, scale, commercialize. And Rabina touched on some of the sort of de-risking, and that's part of what we do when we run projects. We de-risk innovation for corporates, and we help the SMEs access, hopefully, new clients. But there is a huge amount going on in the UK and in Saudi. If we look at the, the amount that SMEs contribute to the economy, they're seen as the powerhouse of the economy. I can't remember the exact figure, but you've got the SBJBC Tech Hub supporting SMEs, accessing opportunities between the two countries. You've got huge opportunities in Saudi, the giga projects like NEOM, in terms of the opportunities that are opening up. And in the UK, there's obviously ourselves and lots of other organisations. You've got our kind of umbrella organisation, Innovate UK. They obviously run a lot of funding rounds and calls for innovation in the UK. We are running a number of accelerators at the moment. One of the ones we did last year was working with the Port of Tyne, looking at clean, decarbonised ports, various different sort of strands from energy generation, business models, digital platform development, and wider infrastructure development, but all to sort of create a replicable blueprint for green ports in the UK. And that's something that we're quite keen on doing, is making sure that these opportunities are open for SMEs, that they can actually demonstrate and test technologies, collect data, so that I think clients, potential clients, can see things happening in real time, and we tend to see really positive results in terms of investment at the end of some of those projects. So it's very much about kind of creating those clusters within the ecosystem, whether that's clean maritime, whether that's decarbonisation of transport more widely, and we do have an SME network that is also open to international companies. So we do a lot of networking, we run open calls, and obviously in the projects and programs we run in the UK and internationally, we will always look to build in the actual kind of demonstration and deployment of solutions on the ground once we've identified what those challenges are.
Thank you. Rabina, just coming back to you, this is very much about Saudi-UK partnership or exploring ways to deepen sort of cooperation. What lessons have been learned in the UK, sort of building up, building innovation ecosystems? What lessons could you maybe share with our Saudi colleagues?
Right, so I think there are quite a few lessons. So maybe I'll pick three in terms of building these innovation ecosystems. So one is, again, going back to that significant research foundation that I think is quite strong across both these countries, and seeing how this can be translated into commercializable applications. And I think funding is one aspect, but then there's also that support ecosystem around it to ensure that those potentially game-changing technologies don't succumb to what we call the valley of death, which is what often happens with startups when they're not able to get that support and funding that would have taken them over to de-risk, to Alison's point, to the next stage. And then in the UK, we are within universities, but also regional level and on national level, we've seen setting up support in terms of accelerators, incubators, more tailored programs to help those early stage startups really understand what the markets need, where they are, and help commercialize that. So I think there are some insights and learnings there. And that takes me to my second point, which is around customer discovery. So at the end of the day, it is about understanding future markets, who those customers are, where those applications can be. So to my colleague's earlier point about ammonia, for example, ammonia has been, it was one of the Haber-Bosch process, which kickstarted ammonia production, was one of the biggest inventions in a way of the industrial process, which kickstarted large-scale food production, leading to the population boom. But that process by itself also contributes to almost 2 to 3% of global emissions. So we need to change that. We need to decarbonize it. But also there's an opportunity for providing a solution for transportation of hydrogen. So there are these applications which I think when you bring that ecosystem together, you can help researchers, have new technical founders understand where the market is, where the challenges are, how this technology fits the solution, and where the gap is. So I think the customer discovery is quite an important aspect. And at Octopus, we've launched our own program to support startups with that, to help provide them access to corporates, to the network, to initiate the initial customer discovery across UK, Europe, but more globally as well. And then on my third point would be in terms of learning is creating that innovation ecosystem, which I think is so crucial. I think there's 5 key players that really need to come together to help accelerate deep tech, clean tech, which is the government, it's investors, it's large corporates and industries, it's startups, and then it's academia. So all 5 players really need to work together to create well-functioning, integrated ecosystem that can help initially fund those technologies, de-risk them at a technological level, help them understand the customer markets, but then also provide the infrastructure, the mechanism to scale them up. So within Saudi as well, there's quite a bit in terms of innovation with the new venture industry being set up in NEOM, which I think provides a plethora of opportunities for collaboration as well in terms of different technologies and what that could mean for the future. So I think those would be my key learnings.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, man, I just want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction with you. So last week, I interviewed your vice chair, Sabah Al-Mutlaq, and he talked a little bit about the philosophy of Al-Fanar, and he talked about some of the projects in Saudi Arabia, specifically women in the workforce. And Al-Fanar is now beginning to make a splash, I think, in the UK. It's almost come from nowhere, and it's got quite a presence. But I'd appreciate it maybe if you could just talk for a few minutes a little bit about the sort of the philosophy of Al-Fanar as a private sector actor.
Yes. I mean, just before answering this question, I forgot one important reason why we decided to invest in the UK. So I said availability of feedstock and carbon capture, but then very important is the legislation, basically. And the UK is, I can say, the leader after the USA in putting a legislation in place to basically create an environment for investment in this sector. So I just forgot this important point, basically. So going back to your question is about the vision of Al-Fanar, basically.
It's about the vision. Rubina, you mentioned the word earlier, empowerment, and I was struck when I was there about how the workforce are empowered, and I was struck by the number of women in the workforce now compared to 2004, and there's a very deliberate vision or philosophy that's being put in place, which I think is important to share.
Yeah. No, sure. I mean, Al-Fanar, yes, our headquarters is in Saudi Arabia, but now Al-Fanar is expanding globally. We have a presence in 24 countries globally, and in order to be a global player, you need to basically have diversification as well as part of the culture in the company, and as well as the qualifications. So basically, for us to be a global player, and not only serving the local market, we need to implement basically global standards in our company. And this has been introduced to the company long time before, not now. I mean, because we expanded in manufacturing for the last 20 years, we are expanding globally. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. So when I went to the factories, I'm just going to say this, and I had a tour. I mean, it was very striking for me that in 2004, there were 4 women working in the factory, whereas there are now 800 working in the factory.
Yeah.
And it's very much a sort of almost like a corporate social responsibility dimension to that. And I think the founders of the company have done that very deliberately to help empower economically young Saudi women that are possibly less affluent from the poorer sections of society.
Yes, sure.
So it's a very interesting.
I mean, private sector has to play a role, basically, in this, and us being a major player in the market, we need to open up these opportunities to everybody, basically. So this is happening in Saudi as well as internationally.
Thank you very much, Abdulaziz. Coming back to you, you sort of laid out, the current projects, but what can we expect from SABIC in the future? what are the future sustainability projects in the pipeline, and when can we expect to see those materialize, and what do they look like?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are, I could say, future projects, especially with the requirement for the net zero decarbonization, where we really need to combine efforts to decarbonize our technologies, producing low carbon products. So this would include the renewable energy utilization, where this could reduce the carbon footprint, either directly or indirectly for scope 1, 2, or 3. In addition to that, we are also considering the importance of the circular economy, where we need to utilize the waste plastics and then converting them into useful materials. Now, the mechanical recycling, which is very well known, is just focusing on producing some materials, but this will sacrifice on the quality of these materials. For example, you cannot use them for food or medical applications. Packaging, for example, those mechanically recycled materials. But with advanced recycling that SABIC is taking, to convert plastic waste into a feedstock, into starting materials where you could use them to produce virgin plastic, similar to the plastics that we produce daily. With this one, we can use them similar to other plastics in the, for example, medical or food packaging. So SABIC is actively working on this track with our very well-known portfolio. It's called True Circle. You can check in our website. So with this one, we can close the loop of circular economy, and also dealing with our materials wisely, like similar to the UN sustainable goals, producing sustainable materials and dealing with those materials wisely, as I mentioned, like in the production and also in the consumption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And perhaps just finally, you could tell us a little bit about SABIC in the Northeast in the UK and what it's doing here, please.
Yeah, I mean, this would be applied for the carbon neutrality in the UK also and in Europe. So producing low carbon materials, that's very important to reduce the carbon emissions using all the types of decarbonization techniques, either carbon capture, utilization and sequestration, or using the renewable energy.
Thank you very much. We've got time for a few questions. If we have, yes, please, could we get a microphone just over here? Thank you very much. We just wait for the mic, that'd be great. And if you could share your name and your company or affiliation, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Bahaj, and I'm from the University of Southampton, UK. I've got a question which I've changed because of what you just mentioned here. You got carbon dioxide, you got wind turbines, you got desalination, and I was going to add hydrogen to it. Our estimate for offshore wind in Saudi Arabia is about 17 gigawatt. And at the end of that paper that we published, we indicated that offshore wind should be used for hydrogen as well for desalination. So thinking about the CO2 and the turbines important. So how could you try and instigate a new industry in offshore wind technologies to allow it to capture that resource as well as generate new jobs in Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Yeah. Before moving to SAF, I used to work for Vestas, the wind turbine, so I can answer this question. And I know about the wind sector in Saudi Arabia. So, well, I mean, as you know, Saudi Arabia is a very big country. It's maybe even bigger than West Europe in terms of size. And you know, the population is concentrated in cities. So there is very big potential for onshore wind first. You know, so it's not like in Europe, because Europe, you know, they implemented wind much earlier, and there are difficulties to get planning and permission in Europe. While in Saudi, it is easier because basically the population is concentrated in major cities. So, as you may know as well, the cost of onshore wind is much lower than offshore wind, because offshore wind you need cables, you need the DC, you need to convert from AC to DC as well. So you need an conversion of the electricity. So basically in Saudi, the first priority is solar and wind onshore, and then potentially, of course, going offshore. So there is, yes, I agree, there's very big potential. I can give you an example, Yambo, for example. We did a study, only Yambo Peninsula can take 12 giga of onshore wind, onshore. And nobody lives there. So basically, the onshore wind potential is huge in Saudi Arabia. That's why the focus is first on onshore and then eventually going offshore.
My question is about desalination. So that's what offshore. Desalination, you need the water.
Yeah. Well, what's the question about desalination? Sorry.
So using offshore wind to desalinate, because you're already in offshore, you got the water in the sea, you desalinate, you have the power, you don't have to transport it.
Yeah. I mean, you could potentially, yes. I mean, but also you could use onshore wind to power the desalination plant as well. So I think there are a number of initiatives in Saudi where, especially remote locations, where they are far from the grid, is to use onshore wind to power the desalination. But it's a very important subject here.
Would anybody else like to add to this point? Okay, thank you. Yes, please, a gentleman. Thank you. If you could give us your name and affiliation, thank you.
Hi, Richard Amnagama from Mikos Technologies. One of the things I'm interested in is when you're talking about investments and investing in technology, when you're talking about investing in technology, how do you spot a winner, especially when you're looking at deep tech companies? Do you have your own in-house teams that do this? Do you use external companies? And then having spotted them, how do you grow them? Again, is that in-house? Do you bring in partners? Do you create an ecosystem around it?
I could take that one. So just to clarify, you asked how do you spot them and how do you grow them? That's what you're asking, right? So in terms of spotting them, we want to get in as early as we can. So we have quite a good relationships with most of the universities across UK and Europe, and different innovators and incubators as well, the research groups. So that's just through those relationships, we do see the new startups, the new technologies emerging. So that's one way of spotting them. And then also we do, obviously, we are present at important conferences and events where we can find and meet those startups and demo days. Once we spot those companies, and then in terms of how do we support them in terms of growth, there are a couple of different ways. So one is this program I mentioned around customer discovery. So once we've given the initial funding, we think another aspect is understanding those markets. And this is more from a customer market de-risking point of view. So the technology risk is there, but how do you understand what the market potential is or can be? So really helping train the companies, providing them, opening up our networks to help provide them access to the different corporates, to help them with an initial customer de-risking and identifying the product market fit from the early stages rather than waiting till Series A or later to do it. Another way we support our companies is for those that we invest in our portfolio companies. We do have a group of venture partners, so they help in terms of then forming the teams around companies, because especially for deep tech, often we see the technical founders are absolutely brilliant who have this technology they want to take to the market, but there are more skills, broader skills you need in terms of commercialization, product, marketing. So then our teams can really work with them in terms of understanding where those gaps are, what your milestones are, where those gaps are, what kind of team you need, and then work with them to reach there. And then finally, in terms of deep tech, so at Octopus, we've been investing in deep tech for many years. So we are lucky to have that ecosystem of our current portfolio companies, of experts, our in-house experts and investment team as well, who can then help in terms of advisory role and support the companies as they grow.
Thank you, Ravina. Do we have any more questions? Yes, please. We could, thank you. Just here. Great. Thank you.
Hello there. My name's Andrew Karim from Active Kinetic One. I'm actually the founder of Active Kinetic One. Active Kinetic One is a new format to generate electricity, but I'd really like to find out from you guys, apart from solar and wind, and I've been out to Riyadh before, so I know that hydro is not really a big option. So other than solar and wind, what other formats have you got for the renewable energy mix that's on the table in the coming future? Have you got anything else that you're seeing that's coming through the grapevine, as we'd say here, that's coming to the forefront of that? Other things.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you start with what is less cost, right? So the lower the cost of energy, the easier you can implement, basically. So yes, there is solar and wind first, but then, of course, from solar and wind, you can produce hydrogen. I'm sure you know maybe about the project which is there in Nyon, which is the world's largest green hydrogen project, producing hydrogen and exporting to Europe. So we believe that Saudi could be a powerhouse in producing hydrogen, big quantities and very low cost. I mean, if you see the cost of production of green hydrogen in Saudi compared to elsewhere, you will see that there's a significant difference. Now, there are other potentials, of course, waste, for example. Waste in Saudi is something which has not been basically utilized yet. So it goes to landfill. But we are actively looking into opportunities how to utilize this feedstock as well, learning from our experience here in the UK, of course, and then basically implementing potentially a project in Saudi as well. Of course, the carbon capture, I think Dr. Abdulaziz mentioned as well, there is a very big potential, of course, of carbon capture for all the industries, oil and gas and petrochemicals. I mean, when you capture the CO2, then you can convert the CO2 as well. With the hydrogen, basically, and you convert the CO2 to CO plus hydrogen, you can produce syngas or equivalent to natural gas. So this is also another potential eventually.
Thank you very much. Chris, did you want to just come and say a few words?
Thanks. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chris Innes-Hopkins. I'm the Executive Director of SBJBC, which stands for Saudi British Joint Business Council. But I'd like to thank all our panelists. We're a business-to-business network, and what we try and do is connect people in the different sectors. And really great that we've had this stream of activity on Cleantech. We had a great event at King's Cross a couple of months ago to bring Saudi and UK Cleantech innovators together. And that was a big success. We had some pitching competitions in the afternoon. And it's great to see some of the UK companies present in the exhibition today. So what I want to say is there's so much happening in Saudi. If you haven't been there, you need to go soon because to catch up with the activity. And please do interact with some of our panelists today. We've got two big investors here, SABIC and Alphanar, both investing in the UK as well as the Saudi. And then, of course, on Octopus, who's a new member of SBJBC, and Connected Places Catapult, we're working with the SMEs to connect people. And of course, Neil, thank you very much. You've also joined a very big media group in Saudi, and we're working together on a really big event, Mansion House in London, 2 weeks' time. Please have a look at the website, UK-Saudi Partnership Forum, and that's going to be a good one. Anyway, enough from me, and I'll hand back to Neil to thank the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to echo that point that Chris just made, if you haven't been to Saudi Arabia or you haven't been recently, then I would really encourage you to go. The energy is just off the scale in every single way you can think of. Anyway, that just leaves me to invite you just to thank our speakers for this panel, and as Chris said, maybe you can engage with them afterwards and continue the conversation. Thank you very much.